All right, testing, testing. Hello, and welcome to my live. I am going to be talking about some of the things that you can do as a therapist or social worker or counselor to make your job search hopefully a little bit easier. Um, as you probably are aware, the job search market is really tough right now. There are a lot of jobs being posted, there are a lot of experience requirements. But for the average person or the person that doesn't necessarily have a lot of experience, especially in the helping fields like social work or counseling or psychology, it can be really tough to find roles that pay what you want them to pay and also give you the type of work-life balance that you're looking for. So I want to share some tips that I've learned along the way that have just made my job a little bit easier when it comes to just finding roles that really are a good fit for me. So I think the first thing, as far as number one, is just making sure that you're highlighting your clinical and transferable skills on your resume. That is something that I think is one of the biggest things because recruiters and companies don't know you personally. The only representation of you they see is what they see on the resume and on the cover letter. So it's really important to make sure that both of those things are an accurate representation of who you are as a professional and the type of skills and experience that you bring into the role that you're applying for. So it's important to use easy to read font like Times New Roman. Make sure that there is enough spacing so all the words don't look crowded together. Make sure that you've taken time to just do a spell check to make sure that you're not misspelling some commonly misspelled words. And also that you are ensuring that all your education is highlighted on your resume. For the jobs that you're applying for right out of graduate school, where you may not have as much experience, you want to lean a little bit more on the education and maybe list that first. For jobs that you're looking for where you're maybe more mid level or you've been in the workforce for a while, it's always better, or it's sometimes better, just to lead with experience, talking about the roles that you've played over the year, the roles that you've had over the years, and highlighting any relevant experience. Additionally, when it comes to identifying experience, I do know that volunteer hours and also other things can can be something that you want to highlight in that relevant experience portion of your resume. And because of that, that also means that volunteer hours can count too. So if you volunteered somewhere, if you've interned somewhere, if you're working in field somewhere, those are all things, if it's relevant to the role that you're applying for, that should be reflected on your resume. Also, if you are licensed, whether it's independently or master's level license, make sure that's also on your resume too, just because employers don't want to have to look up your resume, your license number. So you want it concise, but you also want it clear, and you want it to be a good representation of the skill set that you have. Additionally, when you think about identifying some of those skills that go on the bottom of a resume, some of those specific transferable skills, depending on the role that you're looking for, if you're looking for a role that has certain skills that isn't necessarily demonstrated by the relevant experience section on your resume, you want to at least list those skills at the bottom of your resume so that it's clear what specifically applies and how your experience really overlaps with what the employer is looking for. So that's something to keep in mind. And also, I think something to highlight as far as that relevant experience and those skills that you've learned. Additionally, transferable skills are really important. If you worked in another field, if counseling, if social work, if therapy is a second career for you, and you have another degree or you got your bachelor's in a totally different area, and you worked in a different field before you came into the helping field, that's also something that can really be a way to set yourself apart from other candidates who are applying for the same job. So highlighting any of those transferable skills, but also any of your previous experience that is relevant to the role that you're applying for is really important too. Because remember, they don't know you personally; they're just looking at the resume. So you want it to be a really good representation of who you are and also the type of job that you're looking for. So anything that you've done in the past that's relevant, make sure to highlight. If you had leadership experience, if you had experience training people or managing people or supervising people, that's all something that you want to capture within your resume. Also, with a job search, the keywords can play a really, really, really big piece in the types of jobs that you find. I'm noticing that A lot of jobs just kind of have the standard therapy, counseling, social work, things like that. So it's important just to get creative with some of the keywords that you use when you're looking for jobs. So some examples, some additional keywords that you can use as you're looking for different roles would be that of like a behavioral health navigator, a wellness coordinator, a corporate wellness coordinator, let's say career coach, consultant, program manager, program coordinator, case manager, and also care manager can all be keywords that give you the results of different types of jobs that may not necessarily have the title of being like a social worker or therapist, but what the job entails are all things that you are already doing in some way or you've done before in some way, shape, or form as a helping professional. So be creative with keywords and know that the titles of the jobs may be totally different, but make sure to read the descriptions because a lot of times there are those transferable skills that really highlight that you can really highlight in your resume. And it's also a good way to find higher paying jobs. If you're not trying to find a job specifically as a social worker, sometimes jobs, where the titles that of like navigator or care navigator can typically pay a little bit higher too. And, as we're talking about pay rates, I think it's important to keep in mind that, due to a lot of different factors, that the pay rates for therapists and social workers, for some reason, they tend to be kind of staying still or going down. I recently saw a job posting for a role that required an LCSW and a master's degree that was starting at $18 an hour. And that was here in 2025. And, it made me think of a job that I took about 9 years ago working PRN. And that was at $17 an hour. And that job required a license and a master's degree. And when you think about it, 9 years later, here it is a dollar more for kind of the same role that uses your clinical background, your clinical skills. So anything that you can do to really just highlight the additional skills that you have and also, what you bring to the table is very important. I think a lot of times we tend to kind of pigeonhole ourselves into like a certain aspect of social work or counseling or therapy. And in order to really make the income that you like, it's really crucial to really think outside the box, but also be creative when it comes to those keywords and some of those searches. Another, I think, job search tip is really just to network and talk to people that are in the roles that you want to be in. Professional conferences can be a really great way to meet people in person, especially if you go to a local professional conference where you're getting continuing education units or something that's in your area. That can be a really good way to find out who's hiring in the area and also to find out about different opportunities and roles. I know of some individuals that really get involved as, with their local chamber of commerce and with local business owners in the area, because that can also be a great resource when it comes to referrals, when it comes to finding roles, or even if, let's say, you're in private practice and you just want to grow your referral sources. Plugging in and kind of knowing what's happening on a local basis in your area can be a really good way just to build rapport first and foremost, but also to make connections and network with other business owners and other people that live locally, so that you have kind of a constant flow of referrals, and you also have a kind of a natural network of individuals that you can reach out to, when it comes to, maybe they know of something or they can make a recommendation for you for a certain type of job that you're looking for. Another aspect is just kind of thinking outside the box when it comes to full-time remote work. I really encourage people to also think about what's available to them locally, in your area, because everybody can't work remotely, especially in a helping field. As much as we may be introverts and we may kind of like our own space, the whole piece of social work is being social, and a big aspect of what we do as helping professionals is working with people. In order to do that, it's sometimes necessary to kind of go into a face-to-face format. So don't look down on opportunities that are local. As much as we all like remote work, I think there's pros and cons to that. And ideally, sometimes it's nice to have a commute, even if it's not a long commute, just a short commute, just to kind of have a bit more work-life balance and be able to keep those things separate. But I know that everybody's needs are different, and for a lot of people, remote work really fits what they're looking for. But don't be too quick to say no to something local. Just be open to what's available within, let's say, a 10 to 15 mile radius of where you live currently. Another thing I think is important to keep in mind is just the benefit or the impact of contract work. Contract work typically is, something that where a company's hiring for therapists and they hire them on a contractual basis. That is something that's really popular. Sometimes it's harder to find a W-2 job as a therapist than it is to find a contract role. So it's important to kind of know what your needs are and also kind of what you're looking for and decide whether you want to kind of go the contract route or the W-2 route when you're looking for a new role or position. Um, Teaching can be a really good way to, make some extra money, especially if you don't necessarily want to leave your house, but you want to work remotely and you want some flexibility. Teaching can be a good option, but also corporate wellness programs and EAP programs can also be really flexible when it comes to using your clinical skill set in a different way. When companies are looking for somebody to head up like a wellness initiative or to create a program that really focuses on employees' mental health, therapists, social workers, counselors can be really great people to really plug into some of those roles. And those can sometimes be harder to find. And I find that I see more of those on LinkedIn than on some of the other, more major job search websites. Also, community management can be a big piece of that as far as community organizing, getting involved with what's happening policy wise on the local level can also open a lot of doors when it comes to sitting on different boards and being part of advisory boards where you can, additionally network to other business owners and other people that are local to your area. Also, policy and advocacy work is something to, I think, keep an eye out for as well, just because it's something that tends to be sometimes higher paying, but it also doesn't require a lot of times face-to-face work because you're doing a lot of research. You are kind of advocating for certain different populations, and you're also doing a lot of reading. And so that work can be really, really good fit for somebody that may be a bit more introverted or just maybe needs a break from direct practice. And they're looking for something that's kind of outside the box, but still gives them a chance to really use their clinical skills in a different way. So don't be afraid to think outside the box and to use different keywords and to look at the job descriptions before you say yes or no to applying for it. So those are some of the things that come to mind when we think about, when I think about the job search in general. I'm noticing that there are a lot more mental health startups than there used to be. And so a lot of them are spending a lot of money on marketing or trying to do hiring pushes. And just because you see different roles listed for a company doesn't necessarily mean that the company has all those roles available. A lot of times companies will open up roles and they'll kind of keep like a pool of applicants, even if they aren't hiring immediately for those. So I think the name of the game is really just apply, 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 because you don't know where they are in their hiring process and you don't know, how soon they plan to hire. They usually don't always say that in the job announcement. So I kind of have a personal mantra that if I'm not getting at least one rejection email a day, I'm not applying to enough jobs. So in the market that we're in, it's very important to kind of see it as a numbers game and to take that time to just apply, 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 apply. If it's something that you're interested in, if it's something where it really fits your skill set, don't delay, take a few minutes and go ahead and apply for the job because you never know. There's been times where I've gotten a rejection email and then a few days later, the recruiter called me and said, hey, our last candidate fell through. Would you be interested in interviewing? So even if you do get some of those rejection emails, just know that, doors can open even regardless of getting some of those emails. So don't be afraid to think outside the box and kind of make it a game for yourself, apply to different roles. I think overall it's helpful just to have a really good, solid resume on Indeed so that if something comes up that looks interesting, you can always easily apply for it, which tends to be just a few clicks versus all the boxes and then all the free text that you might do with a job application that comes from another website, another job board. So, definitely maximize, I think, that resource. And don't be afraid to scroll through jobs on LinkedIn too, just because there's a lot of different opportunities available through LinkedIn when it comes to personal connections, when it comes to professional opportunities that can lead to additional, I think, job roles or additional, additional sources of income. So thank you so much for watching. If there's something that I missed, please put it in the comments. If you have a question, please put it in the comments and I'll be scrolling through and looking at those too. And yeah, have a great rest of your day and I'll catch you in the next one.